The white lights from the luxury hangar ceiling gleamed like a sterile opera house above polished marble floors. The $65 million Falcon jet stood in the center like a sculpture of power, its body slick with a fresh layer of wax. Around it bustled a dozen men in sleek black uniforms and earpieces, moving with the choreography of silent efficiency. Then came the heels. 4 sharp clicks. Then silence. Charlotte Reynolds stepped into the hangar wrapped in white silk and power. The kind of woman who didn't ask for permission. Who hadn't heard no in a decade. She paused at the sight of the man beside her jet. Oil-stained jumpsuit. A toolbox beside his boot. His name tag read Marcus. She didn't hide the disdain curling on her lips. Who let that man near my aircraft? The sentence landed like a slap in the stillness. Technicians paused mid-step. Eyes darted. Marcus straightened slowly. His hands, calloused from decades of labor, rested calmly by his side. "Ma'am, I'm with maintenance." There was a report. She cut him off with a wave of her manicured hand. "I don't care if NASA sent you. You're not touching my jet." A chuckle came from one of her assistants, but no one joined in. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply nodded and turned away, walking back toward his tools like a man who had lived this 1,000 times. Charlotte's voice followed him. "Next time, send someone who understands the value of the machine they're working on." He paused briefly, fingers tightening around a small silver object he kept clipped to his belt. A pendant. Circular. Worn. He tucked it into his pocket without a word and kept walking. But before the silence could settle, it shattered. A high-pitched alarm cut through the hangar. Then a hiss. Then a scream. One of the hydraulic pumps beneath the jet's wing erupted, spewing steam and a fine mist of fluid. Sparks cracked from exposed wires near the landing gear. Technicians scrambled. Charlotte froze. Her legs locked. The steam swallowed her in a blink. Her bodyguards didn't reach her in time. But Marcus did. He was already running. Straight through the fog of boiling heat and metal screech. Straight toward the woman who had just humiliated him in front of everyone. He didn't hesitate. Didn't wait for orders. Didn't need them. He hit the release valve just in time. Closed the bypass. Shut the live feed to the hydraulic pump. The machine hissed once more and fell silent. The hangar was still again, except for Charlotte, coughing, eyes wide, hair soaked with the mist, staring up at the man she had insulted only minutes before. No one spoke. Not even her. Marcus didn't say anything either. He just stood there for a second, breathing hard, as the white vapor curled around his shoulders like smoke on a battlefield. Then he turned away. But no one knew, Charlotte least of all, that this wasn't the first time a Johnson had saved her family. And this wasn't just a man with a wrench. He carried a story inside him far heavier than the jet he'd just protected. A story that would come for her like a storm she never saw coming. The locker room smelled like metal and sweat, lit by the weak flicker of fluorescent bulbs that buzzed more than they glowed. Marcus sat alone on the edge of a worn wooden bench, elbows resting on his knees, his jumpsuit unzipped halfway, revealing a dark gray shirt soaked along the collar. His hands were still trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of pressure, of heat, of her face pale with terror just inches from disaster. He stared down at the small silver pendant now resting in his palm. The edges were chipped. The engraving nearly faded. But he didn't need to see the inscription to remember what it said. For saving a life you didn't have to. He clenched it tight until the metal pressed into his skin. His breath slowed, then hitched. The image of his mother, hands covered in blood that wasn't hers, flickered in his memory like a silent film he couldn't pause or rewind. That day, 28 years ago, she'd pulled a man from a burning car just before it exploded. She had no reason to stop. But she did. The man she saved had a daughter, just a toddler then, who who now walked across tarmacs like she owned the skies. Charlotte Reynolds never knew. And Marcus had never told anyone. Not when his mother died of a lung infection no hospital cared to treat. Not when he fixed engines for billionaires who never looked him in the eye. Not even when he joined the airport maintenance team 2 years ago, after reading one article about Reynolds Aviation's expansion into Miami. He didn't come here for revenge. He came because something unfinished lived in the silence between what was owed and what was forgotten. A knock at the door broke the stillness. A coworker poked his head in. "Hey, you okay?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. You saved her life out there." Everyone saw it. He didn't answer. Just stood, pocketed the pendant again, and moved toward the door. As he walked back through the empty hangar, his eyes lifted to the jet once more. It looked perfect again. Polished. Silent. Dangerous. Just like her. He had no intention of ever speaking to Charlotte again. She wouldn't remember him, anyway. Not his name. Not his face. Not the quiet woman who'd saved her father and left this world without thanks or ceremony. But sometimes, life has other plans. And sometimes, silence isn't the absence of words, it's the weight of a truth too heavy to carry aloud. Charlotte sat alone in her private lounge above the hangar, wrapped in a navy robe, her hair still damp from the mist. A cup of untouched jasmine tea cooled beside her on the marble table. She stared out through the wide glass pane overlooking the jet, where engineers now worked in careful silence, avoiding her gaze. Her assistant, Dana, stood nearby, scrolling through her tablet with deliberate focus, occasionally glancing up with the kind of hesitation reserved for moments that begged to be erased. "I reviewed the report," Dana said gently. "There was a fault in the hydraulic switch. If that man, Marcus, hadn't been there, the explosion could have. It could have been catastrophic." Charlotte didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the man below. Marcus stood at the edge of the runway, wiping grease from his palms with a slow, almost meditative motion. There was a quietness about him that unsettled her more than his presence ever had. Her voice finally broke the silence. "What's his full name?" Dana hesitated, then checked her tablet. "Marcus Elijah Johnson. Hired through an independent contractor. Background, clean. Veteran mechanic. Grew up in North Carolina. No red flags." Charlotte turned away from the glass. "Strange. He didn't look new." "He's not," Dana said. "But until today, no one noticed him." The room fell quiet again. Charlotte picked up the teacup, then set it down without drinking. Her fingers brushed the rim once, twice, then stopped. "I've seen that name before," she whispered. "Johnson. Common name." "No," she said, firmer this time. "Not the name. The pendant." Dana blinked. "Pendant?" She nodded. When he turned, there was something silver on his belt. "I saw the shape. I was young, but I remember it." She stood suddenly, moving toward a small cabinet built into the wall. From a hidden drawer, she pulled out a faded leather scrapbook. Dust clung to the cover as she opened it slowly. Inside were old photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings. Her father in his prime, smiling, standing next to aircrafts, next to city mayors, next to her, a little girl with a ribbon in her hair. But on one page, taped to the margin, was a different kind of photo. A blurry image of a woman holding a child, standing beside a burnt-out car on the side of a rural road. A silver pendant gleamed faintly from her neck. Below the picture was a handwritten note, faded by time. She wouldn't give her name. Just said she had to keep moving. Tell her child someday that not all debts are forgotten. Charlotte stared at it, a cold weight pressing against her chest. She looked back down at the hangar. Marcus had disappeared. But the shadow he left behind was starting to feel a lot like truth. And this time, it wouldn't stay buried. Rain had begun to fall by the time Charlotte descended the narrow stairs leading to the underground service bay. The echo of her heels faded against the hum of backup generators and the quiet ticking of cooling metal. She wasn't escorted. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She found Marcus where she somehow knew he would be, alone in the engine corridor, seated on a folding chair beside a rolling toolbox. The only sound in the room was the steady drip of rainwater from his jacket onto the concrete floor. He didn't turn when she entered. "I remembered something," she said, her voice low. He said nothing. She stepped forward. "That pendant you carry. I've seen it before." Still, he didn't move. "I thought it was a coincidence. I thought maybe I imagined it, because I couldn't believe someone like you, someone I humiliated, would still choose to save me." He slowly looked up. His eyes were calm. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just tired. "My mother," she continued, "pulled my father from a burning car. He told me the story once, years ago. Said he never found her again. Only remembered the necklace she wore." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant. He held it in his palm like something sacred. "My mother gave this to me the day she died," he said. "She said there would come a time when someone would need to see it. Someone who forgot what they owed." Charlotte's breath caught. "She was a nurse," he added. "Didn't have a car that day. Was walking to catch a bus when your father's limousine swerved off that mountain road. Everyone else drove by. She didn't." "I was 5, Charlotte whispered. "He came home bandaged and shaking. He never cried until that night. I asked him why. He said, he owed someone his life." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't feel above him. She felt exposed. Small. As if the walls around her title, her wealth, her legacy, had quietly crumbled. "My mother died in a clinic that wouldn't treat her because she didn't have the right insurance," he said, softly. "While your father built empires. You fly in jets she could never dream of boarding. I never came to collect anything. I just wanted to see what became of the people her kindness protected." Charlotte's eyes welled. "Why didn't you say something?" He closed his fingers around the pendant. "Because the moment I had to say it, it would have meant you'd forgotten." Silence filled the space between them like a heavy tide. And in that silence, something shifted, not just in the air, but in her posture, her breath, her gaze. The kind of shift that only comes when truth breaks pride. She stepped closer. "You didn't save my life to settle a score." He met her eyes. "No. I saved it because that's who she raised me to be." She nodded slowly. The woman who had everything now stood before a man who had nearly nothing. But in that moment, he had something she couldn't buy. Dignity. Legacy. Honor. Rain beat harder on the rooftop above them. And somewhere, deep in Charlotte's chest, a dam cracked. Charlotte didn't return to her jet that evening. She sat in her car for nearly an hour, staring through the windshield as the rain blurred the edges of the world. The wipers moved back and forth, but her vision stayed fogged. Not by the weather, but by memory. By the image of a man kneeling beside an engine while her voice cut him down like he didn't belong in the same building. Her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls. 1 from the head of security. 2 from the board. She didn't answer any of them. Down in the maintenance bay, Marcus stayed behind to help the junior techs finish the inspection. No orders. No pay bump. Just work. His hands moved with the grace of someone who found comfort in structure, even if the world around him didn't care to notice. One of the younger engineers, Rafi, watched him closely. He was 22, fresh out of trade school, still nervous around bolts and jet fuel. "You're not mad?" Rafi finally asked. Marcus glanced up. "About what?" "What she said. Earlier. In front of everyone. Marcus wiped his hands with a rag and gave a small shake of the head. "I've been called worse," he said. "By people who meant it more." Rafi looked down. "Still. That was rough." Marcus leaned against the workbench, sighing. "There's two kinds of power in this world, kid. The kind people give you, and the kind no one can take away." Rafi nodded, as if something heavy and unspoken had just clicked into place. Later that evening, the entire hangar crew gathered by the entrance for end-of-shift sign-out. The room was quiet when Charlotte stepped through the door. Her usual entourage was gone. No makeup, no tailored suit. Just a dark coat and hair pulled back, damp from the rain. Every conversation died. She approached Marcus slowly, the sound of her boots oddly soft against the tile. "I came to say thank you," she said. "In front of everyone." He looked at her, eyes steady. "And I came to say I was wrong. I judged you. Dismissed you. Not just today, but long before that. I didn't know your name. But I should have." She glanced down, then met his gaze again. "You didn't owe me anything. But you saved me anyway. And I won't forget that." Marcus nodded, offering nothing more. No smile. No forgiveness. Just quiet acknowledgement. It was enough. As she turned to leave, one of the staff members clapped. Then another. And another. Until the room filled with a slow, respectful rhythm, soft palms striking together, not for Charlotte, but for the man they had always known was more than just a pair of hands with grease beneath the nails. Marcus didn't bask in it. He just stood there, letting it pass over him like the rain outside. And for the first time in her adult life, Charlotte didn't speak. She just listened. Because sometimes, the deepest lessons don't come through speeches or punishment. Sometimes, they come when someone looks you in the eye after you've broken them. And chooses not to break you back. The morning after the storm, sunlight broke across the Miami tarmac like gold spilling from the sky. The Falcon jet sat in silence, polished to perfection once more. The scent of jet fuel had faded, replaced by the clean breath of salt air. Marcus arrived early, as he always did. No one saw him walk the perimeter, checking bolts, listening for vibrations only he seemed to hear. But today, something had changed. A small envelope lay resting on his toolbox. His name, written in tight cursive across the front. Inside was a handwritten letter. Marcus. There are debts money can't repay. There are names we forget not out of malice, but because we've been raised to believe they were never worth remembering. You reminded me that power without humility is just noise. My father told me someone saved his life once. He said the woman disappeared before he could thank her. But now I know. Your mother gave me a future. You gave me a second chance. If you'd ever consider it, I want you to oversee all flight safety at Reynolds Aviation. Full authority. Full respect. No need to respond now. Just know, I see you. Charlotte. Marcus read it once. Then again. He folded the paper slowly, slid it into his pocket, and didn't tell anyone about it. That same day, he took a break outside by the hangar gates. The sun warmed his skin as he leaned back on the bench, arms resting along the backrest. A soft breeze passed through. He heard footsteps. It was Rafi, carrying 2 coffees, awkwardly balanced in his hands. I didn't know how you take it, so, just black, the young man said. Marcus took it with a nod. Black's good. They sat for a while without speaking. Then Rafi shifted slightly. I told my mom about you, he said. Told her how you saved that CEO. Told her maybe the world's not as unfair as it seems. Marcus chuckled. It still is. But sometimes we get to change a piece of it. Rafi looked down at the coffee. My dad left when I was 10. I used to think I had to become someone loud just to be seen. Marcus turned to him. You don't need to be loud to matter. Just steady. The young man nodded, his throat tight. Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Marcus smiled faintly. Call me Marcus. Later that evening, Charlotte stood before a crowd at an internal leadership event. The room was filled with executives, pilots, and engineers. She wore a simple black blazer, no jewelry, no guards. Behind her on the projector was a photograph she hadn't shown in years. A woman, mid-30s, holding a toddler with soft brown eyes. The scorched wreck of a car smoldered behind them. This is the woman who saved my father's life, Charlotte said. We never knew her name. Until this week. The room shifted. And her son works among us. She paused, letting the silence carry the weight. From today on, no one in this company will be unseen. Not the hands beneath the engines. Not the voices in the corners. If we are to fly, we start by standing with the ones who keep us grounded. And in the back of the room, unnoticed by most, Marcus stood leaning against the wall. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't need applause. It just needs someone to finally say, I see you. A week later, Marcus visited a place he hadn't seen in years. The old roadside in North Carolina was quiet now, overtaken by trees and silence. The metal guardrail had long since been replaced. Grass grew where fire once danced. A crooked wooden sign marked the edge of a forgotten bend, gray hollow curve. He stepped out of his truck, walked down the slope where the wreck had happened nearly 3 decades earlier. He stood there a while, listening. The air was thick with memory. From his back pocket, he pulled the photograph Charlotte had shown at the company meeting, the one she had printed and given him after the speech. The one with his mother in it. He'd never seen the image before. She had never spoken of that day in full. Only that she did what was right. But now he knew more. The photo had been taken by a passing driver, later sent to Charlotte's father as a thank you for surviving. On the back of it, faintly etched in pencil, were words that Marcus hadn't noticed until now. Tell the child one day, he comes from someone brave. His fingers lingered on the words. The wind moved through the trees like breath. Then he heard another car pull up. Charlotte stepped out, dressed in a simple beige coat, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. She didn't say anything at first. Just approached slowly, her heels crunching against gravel and fallen leaves. I didn't expect you to come, Marcus said without turning. I didn't expect to feel the need to, she replied. But something told me this place still mattered. She laid the flowers at the edge of the old crash site. They stood together in silence. Then she spoke again, softer this time. I found out something else. My father wrote a letter to the woman who saved him. He kept it in a drawer he never let me open. I found it last night. Marcus looked at her, curious. She pulled a small slip of folded paper from her coat and handed it to him. He read it quietly. If you ever find this, please know, I owe you everything. And if our children ever meet, I hope the world is better by then. I hope your son never has to kneel to be seen. Marcus folded it slowly. His voice was low. I think he'd be proud of how far we've come. And ashamed of how far there's still to go. Charlotte nodded. But he'd be proud of you. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of lilies and damp earth. As they turned to walk back toward their cars, Marcus paused. There's something about that pendant, he said. You remember it so clearly. She nodded. Because when I was 5, I asked my father why he wore a necklace that wasn't his. Marcus turned, puzzled. He wore it. Just once, she said. The day after he came home from the hospital. He said it belonged to an angel. And that someday, I might meet her son. They stood in stillness. Not for closure. But for peace. Because sometimes, life brings strangers to their knees. And sometimes, it brings them home.